Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Chem of the Week. So, been kind of busy, and I got struck with the lovely winter cold this year. So, I haven't done one of these probably in about 2 weeks. But the other cool epiphany I've had over the last probably month is, I was kind of wondering at some point I'm going to run out of herbicides to do for these, and then I realized this is a Chem of the Week update. So, we can do insecticides, we can do fungicides. So this is kind of, it's a little different. I can kind of understand that I could do quite a bit more stuff. So we're going to talk about an insecticide today. So one of the insecticides that we use, and I know quite a few people that use in furrow, is a product called Bifenthrin, which is the active. There's tons of different labels for it. In furrow, a lot of guys use Capture LFR. We use Ethos XB, which is a version of Capture LFR with a biological fungicide with it. There's just a bunch of different brand names, but we're just right now going to talk about the active in that and Bifenthrin. So Bifenthrin in furrow and corn is actually a fairly good insecticide. We used to use it as a corn rootworm control in corn on corn. It's labeled for it, but I will say the activity that Bifenthrin gives you is not anywhere near as much as like Force or Aztec or any of the actual granular soil applied insecticides. So Bifenthrin is not going to be great on rootworms. What I would say is it's going to do a halfway decent job on rootworms in corn and corn situations where you have light rootworm pressure. So if you've had continuous corn for years, Bifenthrin is probably not the product for you, and I wouldn't rely on that for rootworm control. The inverse of that, and what we use it for, and a lot of other people use it for, is secondary pests. So we've really been talking about this the last few years. We get earlier and earlier planting dates, and we start seeing some more of these. We call them secondary insects, but wireworms, grubs, anything like that that's going to affect that corn plant's really early in its life. So, when you plant in late April here, or maybe even early April to the south of us, you're going to have a longer time between planting and emergence that those seedlings could actually be affected by some of these smaller early season pests. So having a cheap, fungicide out or insecticide out there is going to actually gain you quite a bit. When we started using Capture, we probably saw 1,000 or 2,000 plant stand increase. And then the same thing with Ethos XB, we saw another maybe 1,000 plant increase just because of the fungicide in there. We get a little bit more even emergence. But it's not going to complete or cure everything. There was a year where we used Capture LFR, we still had wireworm and grub issues. But that was mostly because we had a poor cold germ on a hybrid. So it's not going to work in every situation. There's two things with Bifenthrin you got to remember. So Capture LFR, and there's a few other ones that are supposedly liquid fertilizer ready. Those are easily blended with starter fertilizer, and most starter fertilizers. We won't say all of them because sometimes that won't work. Some of them are not, and the ones who are not, you really should be looking at like a dosatron system. FMC's come out with their I can't even remember the name of the system at this point, but it's basically foams it and puts a strip ahead of the seed trench. So there's a bunch of different systems where you can get it in there, and fairly cheaply. Generics are going to run you quite a bit less than like a Capture LFR will, but it's something to really look at using, and it's not 100% effective all the time, but it's kind of a cheap insurance for a lot of people. The other thing it's used for, Bifenthrin, is a pyrethroid, so you can use it in corn and soybeans, wheat, anything you want, really. And most of them are labeled, so obviously you got to follow the label. It's actually a foliar applied insecticide, so it's halfway decent on soybean aphids. It'll work on corn aphids. It'll work on Japanese beetle to an extent. I think Japanese beetle, you really want something a little bit hotter. You get a lot of effectiveness out of Bifenthrin, but at the same time, I don't really think if you're going after something huge like Japanese beetle, you're going to want to stay out there with just one product. You're going to want to go out with at least a 2 mode of action deal. The other thing Bifenthrin is good for, and I've used it, and reluctantly we had to use it, is for spider mite control. There's only a few products that will go after spider mites. Basically, in 2012, we used 3 different ones. We were using Saigon, which is dimethoate. The other one is Lorsban, and then you can use Bifenthrin. And each one of them goes after a different thing. Bifenthrin's more of a residual. It's more contact, but spider mites are kind of underneath the leaves. So there is some residual and laminar activity there that will actually get after the spider mites. I am forgetting, after 7 years later, some of the stuff we learned in 2012. But the one thing we learned with spider mites was you don't want to go out with the same mode of action every single time, because each one of them works different ways than spider mites. So with Bifenthrin, I wouldn't go out with Bifenthrin again and again and again and try to go after spider mites. You want to go out with Bifenthrin, then follow with dimethoate, or follow it with a Lorsban type product. So on its own, it's pretty decent, but it's not going to be the cure-all. So that's Bifenthrin. Bifenthrin's not a bad product. We've used it for years in soil applied scenarios. One thing to remember with those two, you want to be in furrow. You don't want to be 2x2. It's not going to really gain you anything, so you want to make sure it's in furrow. Make sure you understand the liquid fertilizer capabilities of what you're using. Some of them will not blend, so you'll want to make sure you put it out there in like a dosatron type system. Blend it with water. Do whatever you got to do to get it on, but understand and work with a rep to understand how that's going to work. Bifenthrin is a really decent foliar applied insecticide. There's a lot of label restrictions on harvest and everything else, so pay attention to those. But understand that any insecticide on its own, we're starting to see resistance, especially in soybean aphids, more to our north and west, because every year they basically have been spraying for them. So understand that one single mode of action, once you start getting foliar, is not going to be the cure-all. So you're probably going to have to start blending or mixing up your products you use. But Bifenthrin on its own, like I said, is not a bad product. Standalone, it's pretty good. Don't count on it for rootworm control on 100%, especially in your heavy pressure areas. It might help you, but still consider traits, or I would even look at more like a soil applied granular insecticide for rootworm if you're going to go that way. So anyway, this week's Chemical of the Week is Bifenthrin. Stay tuned. We'll have some more coming up. I got quite a few other ideas. The podcast has been going crazy. I'm just kind of going nuts with just a bunch of different things. So stay tuned. We'll have more stuff for you in the future.